We are going to chat through this recent news regarding vintage breaks and what appears to be another breaker scam. I'm not going to rehash the work that Sports Card Radio have already done on this matter. There's a few things that are interesting regarding the Facebook group that I've raised with you in the past, a scammer Facebook group, and then also a chat that I had with Chris on Instagram, and some ways that these breakers can be doing better to make sure they're not caught out like this. So I'll give you a quick recap at the very start of the video. But as you can see here, this is the pack in question that Sports Card Radio flagged in this second video. Here's the pack. It goes off camera. It comes back with a different pack. And the way you can tell it's a different pack because these packs of cards had different ads printed on the back of them. In the explanation video, Chris talks about how he just grabbed the wrong pack when he did his video. Now, I'm not going to buy into that. I think Sports Card Radio did a pretty good video on this. To give you some context, Chris reached out to me from Vintage Breaks. I think it was on Saturday, Australian time, to basically say, Daniel, I want to have a call with you and explain what actually happened. Unfortunately, because of the time zone difference, I couldn't do that. And given that I was away for the weekend as well, it was hard to try and chat. I basically explained to him, let me know on Instagram, let me get the details, and then we can chat maybe further on during this week. He said, no, Daniel, I've actually done an update on my latest live, which is what he did here. And what he talks about is that he grabbed the wrong pack when he did that follow-up video, is what he's saying. And you can watch this and make of that what you will. I'm not here to accuse anyone. I think the Sports Card Radio video is pretty damning. And I would say to Chris, his explanation is maybe not the best, but I'm not here to judge anyone, right? Okay, so let's put that aside for now. Let's just talk through some of these other points. What I found, really interesting was that this sports card scammer tracker group that I've mentioned to you in the past when the PayPal goods and services scam came up, which I'll pop up on the screen now, how this is a really good group for you to be involved in order to identify some scams. Chris, who is basically the dude from Vintage Breaks, was actually an admin of this group. And what was actually happening, and this was actually going to be flagged in my weekly news video from the other day, was that people were posting questions because they knew Chris was an admin regarding the Sports Card Radio video, and they wanted answers. And these posts were being deleted. Eventually, what was determined was that he would leave the group as an admin. It was pretty scary for a minute there, in the sense that this is a really popular group, and you've got someone that's a flagship in the hobby, which is what this group is there to be, right? It's meant to be there to support people through their scams and to try and get feedback and support and things like that. You've got someone that's accused of something, and then they're now, trying to cover their tracks in this group by deleting comments and not approving things, whether it was Chris directly or some of the other admins trying to do that on his behalf to protect him. It wasn't a good look, and it almost turned this group into a bit of a shit show, in the sense that how could you trust what was happening if you got these people deleting comments, right? And this stuff generally happens a lot. You see some other groups regarding like hobbies, like watches, like I have here. Some of these groups, you get people that are in charge of them that end up starting to manipulate things to suit their own agenda, which is always very disappointing to see. So that was a bit concerning to see that. He's no longer an admin. He's been removed of that role. I believe he's since been kicked out of the group, or I think he left. I think he explains in his video. But that was just something I wanted to flag with you, right? Stuff like this within the hobby sometimes runs a little bit deeper because you've got these people trying to protect their agendas. Now, like I said, Chris reached out. I couldn't have the call with him. At the time, I hadn't seen the Sports Card Radio video in detail either, so it was hard for me to jump at the chance to chat with him because I wasn't really sure what occurred, and I didn't want to rush to make a video without truly understanding what happened, right? So like I said, the Sports Card Radio video is pretty good, as it always is from these guys. There's 2 videos on the topic. I'm assuming there's going to be a follow-up one maybe tomorrow or the day after, once they've seen this follow-up video. Like to Chris, I don't know if you're telling the truth or not. I'm not here to judge you. I don't know you or anything like that. Maybe like I said a little bit earlier. But this wasn't the best response. And one of the things that I touched on at the start of the video that I think breakers need to be doing, a lot better at is their camera setups, their support. Because Chris, his explanation is, he took the pack, he looked at it, it was damaged. So rather than putting it back on the table and saying something on camera, right, he just replaced it. And that sounds a bit far-fetched, to be honest, but it could be true. So my logic for this sort of stuff is, okay, guys, if you want to be breaking cards and you want to protect yourself from any questions being raised of you, have more camera setups. Having a close-up camera, a downtown camera, and a face cam is not enough. You need to be having cameras that will show everything on hand, right? Because maybe you will see that he just did put it aside. Okay, maybe he still should have said something. Well, he definitely still should have said something. But maybe that would help support his story. So now when he says like, oh, I switched the pack for this reason, it was damaged. And then when I did my follow-up video, I grabbed the wrong pack. Like that stuff doesn't sound very, trustworthy or believable, to be honest. And I'm not hating on Chris because, like I said, I don't know him. I don't know enough about this story to make a judgment on him as an individual. But when you have these kinds of questions being asked, like generally the answer to those questions is pretty damning and pretty self-explanatory. So these breakers, like I've touched on many times in the past where I've talked about, the dark side of, sports card breaking in the hobby in general. You've got these breakers out there that have, established by basically being cowboys. They've come in. The barrier to entry to be a breaker these days is so freaking easy. All you need is a phone. You grab your phone, you're a breaker all of a sudden. You go to Target, you buy some boxes of cards, now you're a card breaker. And because that barrier to entry is so easy for people, it's really then easy to manipulate, as I explained many, many times in the past. So when you got someone that is a genuine breaker, okay, and they're not there to rip people off and they're trying to do the good things, okay, and then something happens and they can't explain it because the camera setup is not the best, it's like, well, that's your own fault, right? You need to be having an appropriate setup. If you want to be charging people money to be buying into these breaks or ripping vintage wax or all these things, you need to be positioning yourself to make sure that no questions can be asked of you. And the best way to do that is have a better camera setup. And if you can't afford to do that, then maybe you shouldn't be breaking cards. Or you need to make sure that packs literally never leave the frame. I've said this hundreds of times when I've spoken about all these breakers scamming people in the past. You can never let cards leave the frame if you don't have an appropriate setup. When you have an appropriate setup, questions maybe can't be asked of you too harshly, right? Because obviously questions will always be asked, but you get what I'm trying to say. In this specific instance, Chris, you might be telling the truth. Okay, you might be telling the truth. I don't know for sure. I think the sports car radio is pretty damning. You know, I like your eagerness to want to have a chat with me, because I think that shows you're trying to be positive about the situation. But when your camera setup looks like this and you sort of make that mistake with that follow-up card, it's hard to argue against, right? So this footage in this situation is pretty damning. His follow-up explanation wasn't the best either, given that he grabbed the wrong pack. I think it's just quite unfortunate. I just think that messaging, you know, around breakers is a really important one to make, and I think they need to be doing better so they can make sure that people don't accuse them and ask them these kinds of questions, because I think if you set yourself up like this, you're almost setting yourself up to fail. So, like I said, please share your thoughts on this down in the comments below. Please check out the Sports Card Radio video. I'll bring it up again. It's really, really good. I'll put a link down below, as I always do. These guys do some really, really good content. They put me in one of their videos the other day with regards to this BBC scenario, which was good to see. There was a bit of banter, so hopefully I'm never in one of their videos and they're hating on me. You never know in this world, right? I pray to God it doesn't happen. So keep an eye out for my video coming later in this week, like I explained in my weekly news video from the other day. I'm going to talk through, you know, the hobby in general and why basically these graders, these authenticators, you know, these manufacturers essentially all suck. Now, I'm not being negative when I say that. I'm going to talk through in detail how, you know, they don't really have an appropriate risk appetite for us as customers within the hobby. And by that, I mean they're not having appropriate business processes in place. They're not giving us enough value as customers for the amount of money they're charging us for their product. And it's a bit laughable. And when I take you through that process, because I do this for a living, you will understand exactly what I'm talking about. So please keep an eye out. That'll come out Thursday, Friday, depending where you are in the world. As always, let me a comment, let me a like if you did like the video. If you didn't like the video, let me a dislike. It's up to you. So yeah, let me a comment. We'll chat as always, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.